G'day everyone. I just wanted to take a quick moment to give a little perspective on why I really love speedrunning. So, speedrunning is the pursuit of trying to beat a video game as fast as you possibly can. It's an idea that's really simple in nature, but it becomes more complex the more you dive into it, which allows you to engage at pretty much any level that you want. So, to give an example, I would say pretty much anyone who's played a video game at all has speedrun to some capacity. A lot of games have, timed events in them, and, racing games are just all about going fast. And that's all speedrunning is, it's just trying to go fast in a video game. I mean, at the other end of the scale, you've then got people like me who try to beat the entire game as fast as you possibly can. I'm often asked the question, how did you get into speedrunning? And it's a really difficult question for me to answer because I don't really think there was a specific moment that I got into speedrunning. There were just so many games that I played as a kid that I wanted to replay over and over again. And obviously, the more you play a game, the more you know about where to go and what to do. And so you end up beating the game faster. I think the first game that I really focused on the idea of going faster every time I beat it was Golden Sun 2, which is actually quite a long game. But the file time at the end, every time I beat it, I wanted to make sure it was lower. But just having that static purpose in the back of my mind just made it even more enjoyable to me. I wasn't even thinking about at the time that I could be competing against and collaborating with other people, to do that as fast as we possibly could. But, then I went online and I found communities that did exactly that. At the start for me, when I was like 9 or 10 years old, it was individual levels in Sonic games and specific tracks in Mario Kart games. Because, of the shorter nature and the fact that they were timed in the game, it made it really easy to compete at, what felt like a really high level and just post the times that you were getting online and try to be better than the other people. I stuck with Sonic for a long time, and it's a series that I really love speedrunning and still do now. And I just loved, how much I felt like I was playing the game really well. And, some of the creativity that would come out of the different ideas from different techniques that you could use in the levels and, different paths that you could take, or, sometimes even finding like a clip or a glitch in the game and then, figuring out how and why this was happening and how can I use this to my advantage? And that kind of brainstorming was, really fulfilling when it all came together. And, it was just really rewarding to then put everything together and run and execute really well. It became really addicting, I was absolutely hooked to that feeling. I mean, I stuck with it for a long time, for a lot of years, but eventually video capture became a bit more the standard, and so then we started to move into the full game runs of games that are more well known now, and I found it admittedly quite difficult to actually do full games at a level that I was comfortable with. I started looking at Sonic 2 and Sonic 3 and going back to Golden Sun, but I couldn't really stick with any of them for a long time. But it was around 2010, 2011 that I really got into SRL as it was forming. So SRL stands for Speedruns Live, and so it was about racing games with people at the same time. So instead of trying to get a really good run by yourself, you would just be racing with other people at the same time. And so I know for me, it took a lot of the pressure off trying to get a really good run at once, and it also opened me to a lot of games that I wouldn't have otherwise thought to speedrun or, even play. I didn't play Gimmick until we did a race of it on SRL, and it was really fun. It's a great game. But in 2011 was when a really crucial moment for me, staying so passionate with speedrunning came along in a kind of innocuous way. A race was started for a game that a lot of people liked, but didn't really know how to speedrun that well. It was Pokemon Red Blue, and the goal of the race was to beat Misty. And so I thought it sounded fun. I loved Pokemon as a kid, and I'd never even thought about speedrunning it. And so this was actually the second race. There was one that was held the day before, and so some of the people had a better idea for the second race about, different strategies to use. I had no clue. I didn't know whether you should even pick Squirtle or Bulbasaur as the starter. Should I fight extra trainers for experience or wild Pokemon, or should I teach Bide to beat Starmie? I don't even think I knew about the TM for Mega Punch. And so by the end of the race, I finished towards the back of the pack. And, for the first time in a race, I was really frustrated that I didn't know what to do. And so the next day, I set about trying to figure out exactly what to do. And I became completely enamored with the idea of routing. So routing it's just what it sounds like. It's about coming up with a route for a game. And so obviously with speedrunning, to try and do it as fast as you possibly can. So for a platformer, it might be, do you take the top route or the bottom route, or do you charge this attack to go fast here? Is it worth the time to do that? Or, how can you beat this boss as fast as possible without dying, But for an RPG like Pokemon, it becomes way more complex the more you go into it, and it becomes way more important as well. The groundwork for just, what Pokemon do you pick, and what moves do you choose, and what items do you buy, and what trainers do you fight, and in what order do you fight the trainers, that takes a lot of time. But it becomes increasingly more complex the more you go into it, and the more, the little time saves end up mattering to you, figuring out in first generation of Pokemon games, if you have 20 items that gym leaders don't give you their TM, and you save a few seconds of text, and then mapping out having 20 items at that stage, and figuring out exactly what tiles to use repels on and to get rid of items so you can have space for the TMs, and figuring out what order to buy X items in at the mart, trying to count exactly how many up and down inputs you would have depending on the order that you buy them in. Is it statistically worth it to get the TM for Blizzard based on its higher power and lower accuracy? Things like that. The problem solving of it was just, for someone like me, I love problem solving. It was just awesome. I just loved it so much. And I just wanted to do more and more and more. And, luckily for me, with Pokemon games, a lot of the skills were transferable, so I could just jump to the next game and the next game and the next game. But going back to Red and Blue, the day afterwards, I got the record for the game, and I just never looked back from that moment. It was certainly not the last day where I spent the entire day just routing out the game. I moved on to Yellow, I moved on to Crystal, I moved on to Emerald, and so many of the ideas, because no one had really taken the time to look at Pokemon in depth for speedrunning before then, the ideas were just all new, and it was just this absolute bounty for me that I could just explore and uncover. And I was learning so much just about the games in general as well. Like, for example, in Yellow, in the last fight, I noticed that whenever I got hit by Kinesis from Alakazam, I would end up being faster than it, even though I was slower before. And to me, it was just, I had no idea why it was the case, but I could conclusively deduce that that was the reason. And it was just the most bizarre and, interesting thing to explain to other people at the time. I think nowadays, just about everyone who's even watched a Pokemon speedrun would know that the reason that's happening is because when your accuracy is dropped by Kinesis, the badge boosts, including the one for speed, are then reapplied, so you end up being faster. I think the fact that something like that is so mundane just shows how much, I've learned about the games in, the 7 years that I've been running them. My favorite games in the series to speedrun now are the ones from 4th generation, where some of the ideas are like, in Platinum, manipulating a level 40 wild Tentacruel and using that as the Pokemon to beat the game. Or, in Diamond, manipulating a wild Chansey that's holding a lucky egg and using Thief to steal it from it. I never would have thought those things were possible. Or, in Heart Gold, Soul Silver, when you're fighting Red, we've mapped out over 100 fights. and then trying to manipulate hitting one of those fights, and based on, how much damage you take, figuring out which one you've hit and then doing the order of attacks. And it's all based on using flash against red. Flash, for crying out loud. Like, this was a move that was so bad. Even as a kid, when I was playing through Gen 1, I wouldn't get flash just in protest, and I would go through Rock Tunnel in the dark because it was just so useless. And now it's the most key, vital move to beating, like, the hardest fight in all of, Pokemon. Certainly from, a speedrunning perspective. I've run a lot of games since then, over 100 categories in like 40 different games, from several different series. I think sometimes people do question whether I really enjoy it as much as I actually do, because, sometimes there is a lot of frustration in getting, a really good run with speedrunning. But I think that frustration, I mean, for me anyway, it's an indicator of, how invested I am in it. When you're emotional and when you are passionate about something, you are vulnerable. And so there is going to be frustration when things don't go the way that you want. But, it's so worth it for the ecstasy, when things actually do go right. And, being able to produce something, of high quality that you are really passionate about is a really, really good feeling. I think another one of the things that I really, really like about speedrunning is that the competition isn't necessarily player versus player. Like, I like player versus player competition, but with speedrunning, in a way, it's actually more, because you're not competing directly against one another, it's more like it's player versus game. And so, in effect, it's like speedrunners are all kind of on the same team as player, and we're all working together and collaborating different ideas and techniques and strategies so that all of us can beat the game as fast as we possibly can. And so, it makes sense that then the people who are really, excel and engage with speedrunning at a really high level are actually those who work well with other people and can communicate and socialize well with other people. I've met some, fantastic people through speedrunning, like really vibrant personalities, and, some of the most important relationships in my life are people that I've met through speedrunning. Because of the hobby, I've gone overseas multiple times, several times I've just gone, just to meet up with, just friends that I've met through the hobby and just get together and have a blast. And, in the backgrounds, participate in an event that's, raised millions of dollars for charity, which I think, has and will continue to change the perception on, people who play games in general. And so I think as a niche hobby to be able to have that kind of impact as well is pretty great. I think, just like any other hobby, speedrunning isn't for everyone. But, there are a lot of people who they really just, for some, it's just they enjoy replaying through their favorite games. And some people just really enjoy breaking a game, to a specific end as much as they can. Some people, really enjoy collaborating and communicating and competing with people at a really high level, through video games. And for me, it's like I love the positive competition. I love the problem-solving aspect. Some of the intellectual problems that I've, faced through speedrunning are some of the most engaging and fulfilling that I've come across in anything in my life. And, I just love indulging in something that I'm so passionate about. Speedrunning is just something that's given me so much joy in my life, and I think it'll continue to in the future to come as well. And, there are people who enjoy watching me, or someone else speedrun video games. And so I think just doing something that gives you a lot of happiness that can make other people happy is great, and you really can't ask for anything more than that.